Very good. We do want to be recorded.
That would help.
Content.
That would help just a little bit.
Okay. In a world of capes and lunatics, of gods and monsters, of heroes and villains, and those who put it all together, this is the story of Avengers Assembled Loki, and this is Nuff Said. Avast me hearties, and welcome once again to Full Stream Ahead. I am your host, Charlie the Professor Esser, and with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
Yeah, it's Mozz.
Hey, Mozzie, welcome back, cats and kittens, dogs and friends. We are at the little way station between when a Marvel series ends and a new one begins. That is the time of the assemblage. Marvel Studios Assembled, the making of Loki, has dropped. And the first thing you notice about this is a very different Assembled from other Assembleds in its own meta-narrative, I feel we open with that very Shakespearean, Loki-esque, if you will, discussion of what the narrative is going to be and how we came to it. And I think this is tying back to its roots in Thor with Kenneth Branagh and the man who did bring it all together. And I really was impressed with how much they did talk about Branagh and his vision for Thor. I mean, they dropped him after the first one, I think. But still, the idea that this was always meant to be a These and Thou kind of a show, even as it moved beyond it in its themes, it was always meant to be these grand cosmic ideas, or even just these grand royal houses. And I enjoyed that. Like I said, I felt that and giving it that meta narrative with a character like Loki, I really felt it was something I don't feel we've seen in the other versions of this. I think part of this, everything,
a capstone kind of thing. Like it was like the ending of a trilogy that was in its own way like a bridge to phase 4, I guess. That's where we're going now, right? Phase
well,
4?
I mean, obviously, that's one of the big things, and that's like the big elephant in the room that no one is talking about with all of these shows, which is that all of them have introduced a teen superhero concept, many of whom are tied to the Young Avengers. And in fact, that's and we've talked about this before, that one of the Young Avengers is Iron Lad, who is Kid Kang. Although there is actually another Teen Kang who isn't Iron Lad, and he gets involved with Doctor Doom in another story. But that's another good one. One of my favorites, where Scott Lang, Ant-Man, defeats Doctor Doom. So it's good. It's when he was running the Future Foundation, but that's comic book stories. We're here to talk about TV shows. But yeah, I mean, it was really fascinating to me how much of what they're opening up with this really means for the Marvel Universe. I mean, not the least of which is just the idea that, whatever else is going to happen in this story, what's the word I'm looking for here? Whatever else is going to happen in this story, there is a plan, but that plan might not be what we think it is. And this is where I think it gets interesting, because of course we're ending Loki with our new multiverse, obviously.
Right.
And in our assembled multiverse, we're now also looking at the idea that, we're going into what if from this. And if we go into what if from Loki, it means we have opened up the possibility for everything coming into it, and in many ways a rewriting of timelines, because, and I think this is the thing that people haven't really thought about yet, when Loki goes back to the TVA and it's a different TVA, we kind of have to remember this is a different Loki. This is not 616 Loki, if you will. This is not the MCU's Loki. This is a variant Loki that was from a spun-off timeline that then went back to his own time, to this timeline that is a variation of the timeline, because time is a closed circle. And once it starts opening up, how it comes together, although it's always going to rhyme, there's always going to be a he who remains at the end. How exactly it gets there is less important than just the fact that it gets there. And I think that's really the story that we're looking at here.
It's so interesting because in that moment when Loki gets there and he has to encounter a whole different TVA than he's ever known, a whole different world and sets of characters, it's almost like they're doing the same thing to us, and we as the audience are mirrored in that reaction, because the MCU is not going to be something we recognize very much at all going forward. So many things are going to be shaken up, and it's kind of nice that they are giving themselves the freedom to just reinvent whatever they want and not to be tied down by things. When, for how long has it been? Was it 15, 20 years, 10 years? That they've been tied down to these decisions, and they're like, man, it'd be nice to be like the comics and just do whatever we want and write interesting stories. Yeah. So this gives them the freedom to be able to do that.
Well, it's always important to remember that comics don't get to do just whatever they want. They have to, they always square their own circles where
right, but they have the freedom to take new avenues and build them into the central narrative, right? With movies, because there's so much money on the line, you can't really have the freedom to do that. So with this, it sort of says it's still part of this big corporate structure that everybody's going to love and buy anyways, but we've created an excuse within that to sort of be more like the comics and have more room to explore different avenues, and that's really, I think, what's exciting about this.
Yeah. And there is a quality to it which I think is kind of important to remember here, which is what's his name? Mobius, when he first meets Loki, saying, this is what happens again and again and again, which kind of suggests that the TVA is in this loop, in this little Jeremy Bearimy cycle. And in it keeps on looping back, but then it doesn't always have to loop back exactly the same, which is why this Mobius has never met not just this Loki, but any Loki. Because in this line, the Lokis aren't the issue that they were. And maybe that's because of Sylvie's doing, maybe that's because of something else. So that's the opening up there. But
either that or they were successful in eradicating the Lokis well before Mobius became an analyst.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, that's an interesting question. Like, did Sylvie, because let's imagine
Sylvie doesn't exist in this world either. If they have never encountered a Loki, and if there aren't any Loki.
Loki's still at the end of time. I mean, Sylvie's still at the end of time.
Fair enough.
So, and this is where that whole Miss Minutes is the real source of all doom and destruction.
No. But if she's at the end of time, she's just an exception. She's like this bubble of reality that was forced to be created.
What I'm saying is, so there is this going back and forth in time, right? And the idea that there is a Sylvie at the end of time and a Miss Minutes that extends beyond time, that when they create a new variation. Okay. Sorry, just
no worries. When they create a new variation of,
when they create a new variation on this universe, when they create this
Hmm.
new variation, um, Sylvie is the person that Miss Minute sees as she who remains.
Hmm.
And when the timeline resets and Miss Minutes goes, well, no, we need to be the TVA. We need to maintain this timeline.
So how
Then
does
she says, you're the one in charge. You get to decide how it all ends.
is the implication that because a variant of Loki is in the Citadel, no other variants of Loki can exist in the outside world, much like the same they were trying to tell us about Kang? Because he's in the Citadel, or no other Kangs can exist. But if somebody takes over the Citadel that's not Kang, now the Kangs can exist. I wonder if that's a dynamic that they're
I mean,
playing
that's a
with.
possibility. So maybe she has tried to eliminate all Loki variants from the universe to prevent her own multiversal war.
So this is
Um,
their tricky way of eliminating all Lokis by just putting the Loki in the Citadel, trapping her
or
there, so that
only
no.
the right Lokis. Only the Lokis that will die eventually. Only the Lokis that won't lead to
Ah,
a multiversal war.
right. So
Because a
and they
Loki,
those will take what, one generation to die out, 2 generations to die out.
well, I mean, it says that Asgardians live a very long time.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, how long is a human lifespan? Unless you're at the end of all time and you live forever. That's which is the idea why Immortus eventually goes to. It was essentially what they call limbo, which is the
Mm.
place outside of time. But the idea is that if Sylvie, so here's the idea. So Lokis seek to conquer, Lokis seek to destroy, but Lokis are also very self-destructive. So another Loki rising to this point is going to be less problematic. And at the same time, Kangs are more problematic for Sylvie, but maybe less so because the multiversal war can happen so long as no one is interfering with her situation. So exactly what the TVA's responsibility is now is open for debate. Is Sylvie still in charge, or did once that Kang variant died, did another Kang variant simply show up with more knowledge?
Or is Sylvie sticking to her guns in the Citadel, saying, "Yeah, I'm at the center of control, simply because I want to make sure nobody does exert control. So I'm sitting here being one of these, creator beings that is not getting involved. I'm letting everything happen because that's what they want to do. Who am I to get in your way?" And that's what's causing the Kangs to be able to usurp so much power, because nobody's out there stopping them.
Well, I guess the counter argument is you could let all the universes grow, but you
Mm,
simply stop every Kang before they come into being, which
mm,
maybe is how you get your Iron Lad.
mm,
Because if one Kang gets out, if one Kang escapes Sylvie's rule, that's how Iron Lad gets out. That's how Iron Lad forms the Young Avengers. And that's how they fight Sylvie with Loki, maybe even Kid Loki, against this. And then that reestablishes that Kangs can now come into existence again.
mm,
And then you get the evil Kangs. And then it's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. But
mm.
that's when the multiversal war starts. So it's all possibilities. You
Mm.
know, again, because this one focused so much on story, I don't think we got as much of the technical weirdness of it. But then again, I think that there was less technical weirdness to discuss in this.
Oh, there were
I
only
mean,
6 episodes.
yeah. Well, they were all kind of 6 episodes, but also I think that it's like they created an alien world, went to an alien world. It was cool, and there's a lot of interesting aspects of it, but that really nothing about the tech of it, I think, was as groundbreaking as it was when we first saw it in other versions. When we saw when we watched WandaVision, it was about here that how they're trying to match the special effects of the time, and they want everything to feel like those shows felt. Likewise, I think when we got to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think that, again, that was a bit more about the personal experiences of everyone, but also at the same time, it was about, how the technical difficulties of the time that they had to deal with, because that was the one that really had to adapt to COVID in ways that other shows didn't have to. And I think that's kind of, it's kind of like, WandaVision was the one that was on the closed set. So it was the one that was super easy to do in a time of COVID. Loki had a lot of closed sets too. So it could come out as well, but the Falcon and Winter Soldier was the one that really had to adapt. I think so that became the narrative of that. This one, the narrative is just literally the narrative and how these characters have evolved and how storytelling has evolved in the MCU and Marvel. And I think it just gives us so much that we can just imagine about what comes next. And I think that's what a good comic book does too. Is it gives you so much to wonder about what comes next. Because when we get to that scene, when we get to our cliffhanger, and that's a real cliffhanger, when he goes back to the TVA and it's not his TVA, it opens up any number of possibilities about what's going to happen next. And what's interesting in that is that because of this, you're going to start to get what you might call a Rick and Morty effect, where you're never quite sure what timeline we're in because the timelines do cross. And I think that's where things are going to get interesting, is when we actually talk about the physics of the creation of a timeline and whether or not timelines do cross. If dimensions do merge and we get our little Mandelas.
Saved the wrong one.
Yeah, well, it's the idea that, two universes could extend for a period and then become similar enough that they merge.
Yeah,
and then it's like, no, I totally remember what happened before.
Right. Or if it's like a very similar version of your universe that you go back, all your people are there, and you save the woman you love, right? And then you find out, this one's left-handed? Wait a second, was this universe almost the same as... I went back to the wrong universe that's almost the same as mine, and I saved...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, my love, she's dead. But still...
Yeah, well, that's actually that is like the saddest episode of Sliders, when they go back to, they say, when the one they meet one of the Quinn Mallory's who's figured out he's the one who's selling science products to the world where everyone just believes in sorcery. And he says, no, I figured out how to do it. Now, yeah, I can send you right back to your home universe. But when they get there, they realize they've only got like 10 minutes to decide, is this their universe or do they make the next jump? And, Quinn says, look, I know this gate has always squeaked since I was a boy. It has never not squeaked. If I open it and it squeaks, then we know we're in our home universe. He opens it and it doesn't squeak. And they go, well, I guess we're not in our home universe. And then, of course, after they leap, the guy that's been like the evil, one of the evil reoccurring variants in that story comes out and he's the handyman and says, yeah, Miss Mallory, I finally got around to oiling that gate like you told me to. So no more squeaks.
That's great.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And that's the fun of it, because that their characters, was it not? Knows.
I think what he realized in that moment was that device and that portal is his home. That's the only bit of consistency he's had in so long.
Yeah,
the only thing he could rely on that's always been there for him.
We'll see here too.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things in here that I was interested in hearing about what their intentions were in doing certain things. And, hearing the director talk about how Sylvie was supposed to be a Loki, that she was supposed to be one of him, a variant of him, like him. And then to hear her thought process about how she went about showing us that they were similar, and everything she said was a superficial costume idea. And it seemed to me that that's as far as she was willing to go to show that they were similar. Nothing in personality, nothing in intention, nothing in commonality of shared experience, aside from something told or about their story, but nothing in their behavior that showed it to me. So that was interesting for me to hear her say, yeah, she was so similar, right? She was green and she had the gold thing around the neck, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like, ugh. And it sort of, and then the other thing that I thought was really interesting was hearing Jonathan Majors talk about what that scene meant and hearing Loki talk about what that scene meant. And they were going in two very different directions. And
Well,
it
of
seemed, I
course.
wonder what the tension on the set must have been like. Because for me, if I'm Loki, if I'm Tom Hiddleston, that last episode is supposed to be my episode, right? And the way it was planned was I was going to have all these expositions or these little vignettes where I see my future, and like that gets taken away and given to this guy. And you see, I wonder what this tension on the set must have been, because you see they're going in completely opposite
Well,
directions.
you know,
Kang is going, I'm just going for the bored guy, and I'm so bored I've become the trickster.
yes.
And it's like, fucking, that's Loki's gig. Why are you doing Loki's gig on Loki's show,
Well,
right?
because
And then Loki turns around. He's like, oh yeah, no, that was supposed to be about. He's so scary. It's supposed to scare us about the Kangs, right? And
well,
it's exactly what I saw when I watched the episode, that they
you
were
know,
going in one direction,
and I get
and
what
he
you're saying.
decided, huh?
I said I get what you're saying, and I
Mm.
understand what you're saying, and I think that might have been completely intentional in the idea that, quite frankly, you know, when you have your actors on the set, every actor's view of it is going to be a little bit different, because they are actually telling the story with themselves as the protagonist. And so for example, when Sylvie says we have these similarities and then points out these things on the
No, it wasn't
costume.
Sylvie. It was the director of the show saying,
Oh
talking about
yeah.
her
Okay.
plan.
But again, that's the idea, is they're saying, these aspects of it are, this is how we're communicating it. But then from each character's perspective, it's about how do you pick up these items and how do you gather them to you. And then when you're in your final scene, what are you presenting? And yes, Jonathan Majors makes he's the bored man he's the bored god who's become the trickster. But what is more scary than the trickster? The trickster is, and this is actually an interesting thing. I was having this conversation about, because someone was talking about, like, oh, is Maui a Loki variant? And because he goes and
Maui?
gets the Maui from Moana.
Okay.
Yes,
There's a whole character
yeah,
I've
you're
never heard of in this show.
welcome.
Where
You're
was
welcome.
I?
No, but it's just it's basically your cross Disney universe and Rapture. And Maui is a trickster god. Maui is a classic trickster god. They are absolutely two different mythologies, but and then there's all these people who are saying, well, a little bit of appropriation to suggest Maui is Loki, when really you could also equally argue that Loki is Maui. That Loki is a Maui variant.
And I'm sure trickster gods existed in some form before both of those mythos.
Well, the idea is that the trickster god is actually the primary god. And you'll actually notice this, because actually, if you read Odin is a trickster god. In his own way, Zeus is a trickster god. Usually, the elder gods are usually tricksters, and they evolve from the tricksters. And then another trickster, like a lesser trickster god, comes into the story as well, because people eventually feel like, well, we can't really have, the king god always being the trickster. But I get the feeling that the trickster god is like the first god, because the trickster god is the god. Because if you imagine that gods evolved from man's dealing with nature, and nature is a trickster. Nature is something that is trying to kill you and can, to quote Jungle Cruise, which everyone should go out and see. No, but I like that film. I'm gonna give Dwayne the Rock Johnson a little bit of my love, because the man deserves it, and he's a national treasure. But everything can kill you. Everything wants to kill you and can. And the trickster god is the god who says, you are probably going to die, but I don't want you to die. But the only way to convince you to not die is if I can trick you into understanding how your weaknesses are killing you. Because the trickster god is a god who exploits your weaknesses. And the trickster god exists in myth. So trickster god isn't like, you can make the argument that trickster god came down and, you know, said oogity boogity, and then you did this stupid thing, and then now look at how badly you're well off. But the idea is that, you know, if you were trying to teach a lesson, you would tell the lesson of the man who didn't who was so certain of himself and his ability to control nature that nature eventually smacked him down. And that is the trickster god's role, is to be nature smacking you down because you don't understand that nature isn't your friend, that all these things are going to come and eat you. And if you think that you just have so much control over things, that probably means you're not thinking far enough ahead. You're not trying to outsmart the trickster enough. The trickster is going to get you. And in that sense, that proto-god of the trickster is the god who wants to help you, but knows we got to work through your own stupidity to get there. And so in that sense, you know, when we deal with a character like Loki, who is a great trickster god, and for what it's worth, the Norse religion is chock full of trickster gods, as far as we know. And that may be, of course, because of Christian influence trying to make all of them seem like Satan, but at the same time, it just makes them so much cooler. You know, right. Because of course, you know, he has the best rock bands. All the best bands are affiliated with Satan, as Bart Simpson once said.
Right. Because everybody grew up, you know, for the first 10 years of their life being told that it was the worst thing in the world, and the next 10 years in life rebelling against everything they were told. So
exactly. And you know, you need to rebel because you need to be able to break tradition to learn new things. The only way you survive is by learning new things. And the only one who wants to teach you new things is the god that is going to tell you how stupid you are.
Right.
And, you know, and that's the thing. And, you know, and you can see elements of the trickster god in Yahweh. You can see elements of the trickster god in Allah. You can see elements of the trickster god in all of the major sky fathers of every religion. And then there's usually some other god that they sort of says, but this guy we're going to make do most of the pranks, just let the sky father, who really is from the prankster god origin, doesn't have to sully himself all the time.
It almost seems like the modern god is just a consolidation of all the gods. The gods were like all got together and said, hey, we got to unionize, right? Let's just call ourselves God and we'll handle all the bureaucracy, but it'll be God, you know?
Yeah, you know.
That'd be a great story.
You have to have a place to send the checks to, you know?
Right.
You know, I mean, for what it's worth, that's sort of the story of miracle workers, that it's that, you know, there is a God, but really it's the bureaucracy that's keeping everything running.
Right.
And
we are all
you know, yeah, well, you know, it's Love Miracle Workers is around their third season right now with now they're on the Oregon Trail, and it is, well, again, not sponsored. But yes, you should probably check out the Oregon. You should probably check out Miracle Workers Oregon Trail too. It's a great show. There's so much good entertainment out there, and that's what we try to get to you here in Full Stream Ahead and Enough Said.
Imagine God's TVA. Like all these miracles that used to happen back in the day, the bureaucracy was strong. They had a bunch of gods on the payroll, and now no miracles happen. You know, there's 5 gods left on the payroll, and there's so much chaos they have to attend. It's like, God, come on, we can't. And, you know, everybody's counting on God, and you know, it's like there's 5 gods left.
And I think the argument is that we used to need a lot more miracles. It's like at this point, it's like if you're not if you don't want the miracle, we're not going to force the miracle on you.
Mm.
And that's that. Basically, we've privatized the trickster god, where it's like, you know what, you think you're smarter than, viruses and vaccines. We'll see how that works out for your friend. I mean, this is going to be some mythos for some later days, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
where we're at.
this is one of those wonderful problems that might just take care of itself.
Well, it does eventually. I mean, that's the thing, is like, it does eventually solve itself, not in the way that the people think it will.
No, but I mean, hey, you do.
Yeah, but the problem is that if you're compassionate and you worry about the human suffering.
I understand that, but you also have to be a pragmatist and understand that some people are not able to be reached. So there's nothing you can ruin your own day, or you can say, hey, you know what? Hey, you have the right and the freedom to lay in your own bed. Dude, who am I to say what? Hey, as long as I know that there are measures in place and structures in place to protect the people that want to protect themselves, I'm fine with you do whatever you want to do. We do live in a free society. And
the only problem with that is, one, of course, this is apparently a far more aggressive virus than we thought it was going to be, that is keenly adaptive. So, hey, good news, conspiracy theorists. If you really did think that this was meant to be a bioweapon that accidentally got out of a Wuhan lab, there might be some evidence for it. So congratulations.
Either way,
vaccine.
If you do believe that, why are you letting it work on you?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the other aspect of it. It's like, that's, if you're a conspiracy theorist, it doesn't actually have to make sense at the end of the day. It just needs to make sense in the moment to you.
Right.
You just need to justify your action to make the next bad decision. That's literally how the trickster god works.
The way I'm seeing it is the people that are not going to vaccinate are going to let it mutate inside them and then create new variants. And then maybe for the next 2-3 years, we're all going to have to get booster shots to deal with, the people that are, the what do they call those? The harboring fugitives or whatever, what's the word I'm looking for?
The carriers. I don't know.
Yeah. I know, but it's like you're harboring fugitives, right? So you let the bad guys harbor inside you, they get birth, and then next year we get a different vaccine we have to take. And then within 5 years, all those people that, those houses that mutated these will all be gone. And there'll be no more houses left to mutate in. Right?
So there's two aspects to this story. One is, yes, but the vaccine is not 100% effective.
Right.
And that means that
we'll have to go through some growing pains. But I imagine, does it sound to you reasonable that in a couple of years, in a couple of rounds of this thing, enough of the idiots will no longer be here?
Well, in 50 years, in 50 years, you don't mourn the dead as much as you used to. And that is the sad truth of life, but it's sort of one of those moments where you're like, right now we'll have to mourn the dead, and there will be innocents that are taken with it. And that's sort of where the frustration of the moment comes.
Of course.
Because there's going to be a lot of innocent people who, because they happen to live in a country that, didn't
think about this though. On the other side, the other side is making the same argument. That's a certain amount of people will be hurt by the vaccine as well. And that's a truth we have to accept as well. But that's a truth we're willing to accept, right? Because it's worth it to get to. So by the same token, if there's some hurt that has to happen, some measure of it we have to, accept. We are in a bad situation. We're not in a good situation. And if we keep pretending like we're not in a bad situation, that's not going to help anybody.
No. What it is it's so remember in that first episode or second episode of Loki, when they're talking about the apocalypses, and he's going into this and he's trying to explain to Mobius about how if he goes back to Ragnarok, nothing he will do matters. And he's like, yes, because everyone you know and love is destroyed. And Loki's like, yes, terrible business that. It's like, it's like, that's not my point here. It's like, yes, I know they're all going to die. You told me they're all going to die. I've made peace with that. They are all dead.
Right. Go on.
But, it is this thing that, in the so it's great. Yes, 50 years from now, we'll be saying, yes, terrible business that. It's unfortunate that that's how it happened. But, in the moment, if you're saying, yes, terrible business that, as you're watching everyone die in front of you, it's a little cold-hearted in my opinion.
Mm,
I
I mean,
gotta
like,
say,
you can have that measure of perspective, and people's responsibility is their responsibility, right?
well, yeah, when it's their responsibility. That's my thing.
Right,
It's like I
right,
don't worry about. I mean, I do worry about the people that I do know and love who
right,
have not gotten vaccinated. I'm like, dude,
right.
please, for God's sake. But then I think about the people who literally can't get vaccinated because they're too young right now, or they're
Or in other countries,
immunocompromised, or they're
or in other countries.
or in other countries. They're in freaking Africa, and they're like, we would really like some of those vaccines. All of you idiots are saying you're not going to take.
Right,
So
in
could you send them
Mexico,
to us so
which
we
is
can like,
right next
yeah,
door.
yeah,
So
exactly. Everyone was like, we would love some of these vaccines, and again, that insanity that the trickster gods are always trying to kill us with. That we won't take them, but we'll be danged if we're going to send that to you for being
yeah,
born where you
yeah.
decided to be born.
I
And
think this madness all started with trickster gods creating the Facebook page called Flat Earth. That's where it all started.
oh, it's. I wish we could pinpoint anything like that. Honestly, I would love if there was
For
a
me,
moment where we could say,
that was the first outrageous, wild, ridiculous, clearly, obviously dumb theory that I was blown away how many people started like subscribing to. And for me, it was
"Oh,
like, wait a second, we're in a downward spiral. And from there, it's been insanity followed by more insanity.
well, what I'm going to say is it's gotten exponential. But that's not new. And to be fair, there
But
was
I
the
think in
man will
the
never
age of
fly.
the internet, I think that was the first common coming together of dumb people that gave them a false sense of security that happened because of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it gave reach. It gave reach. It allowed things that had always been there, but were always just pockets to
Mm-hmm.
suddenly be able to flash mob.
Coalesce. Yep.
So I mean,
Yes.
it becomes the tools of flash mob that were just meant to be silly dance parties suddenly becoming used to riot and attack people, and it's the world is crazy, and what are we gonna do? It's that's the problem.
At
Is
a
that
certain point, you've got to see the wave coming and be like, okay, I think we've gone too far. I don't know that there's a way back from it. We have to let the damn thing crash and then settle out. I think that's where we are.
yeah, I and here's what I always say to that, because this is the just let the world burn argument,
No, no,
which
no,
is,
not let the world burn, but have faith in the fact that humanity always springs back.
oh
Like we
yeah,
go through
yes,
tough
yes,
times. That's my perspective, right? We're gonna go through this, but we're gonna be all right. It's gonna take us a while to get there because, in my opinion,
yeah,
the first thing we have to do is fix our education system and fix
yeah,
the next crop of young people that we create, right?
yeah,
And give them more tools to be able to understand their world
and
in a more effective way. And we're
and I'm,
not doing that with our education system. And
oh,
that to
actually,
fix that,
I would argue the exact opposite. I
oh,
would argue,
I hope you're right.
I would argue that kids today are smarter than I was, and I actually, this is what I always say. It's like
They're more knowledgeable as far as
no,
if they're
smart. They're
emotionally
smart.
smarter or more capable of handling the world. I wonder.
I think, and again, I can only look at the items I can observe, so I can observe my family. Now, I come from a family of smart people who do dumb things, um, which is common for smart people, by the way,
Hmm.
because nothing the trickster loves more than someone who is smart and knows it, and it's just, well, since you're so smart, I'm sure we can figure out some brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say, and I see this when I look at my generation, and then the generation from the children of my brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
you know,
I'm
that, oh,
simply
I
looking at
see.
the amount of the loudest people on the internet. And my perspective is thinking about how well educated is this person? How well does this person truly know why they stand on their opinions? Or are they being hoodwinked by this mob mentality of everybody around me believe this? So I better believe it too, so I can have something to belong to because I don't really know who I am or what I stand for.
And
I
I'll
think
bet
there's
you
a
if you
good
look at
measure
the
of that.
And I bet if you look at the actual age demographics, there's a lot fewer under 20s than over 20s.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that is where, because this is so.
But that's
so,
what
and this is a story I was getting. Because here's
okay.
Well, let me just give you this interesting anecdote. So I am class of '92. I was born in 1974. So you can all do the math. And I went to progressive but Roman Catholic schools my whole life. And so I learned about redlining. I learned about the seizure of Hawaii from the native peoples for the Dole Corporation. I learned about Black Wall Street, and probably I learned about the Tulsa Massacre. But what stuck with me was Black Wall Street and how cool that was. That, oh wow, man, these guys just made that world for them. Isn't that awesome? And I didn't really read the rest of the chapter because it was you're on your own reading, but it was knowledge that I had. It was knowledge that I had. And the thing is, and then I recall remembering back. I said, wait a minute, I remember watching news reports about how there were all these protests in Texas about school book legislation. I started to realize, oh my gosh, I was in that golden that golden moment when they were actually teaching children stuff about history in schools. And then they started to pull back from that in a lot of places.
Yep.
But that because of things like the internet, I think that truth bore out. And to give you again that idea about the youths, if you will, that since they were always going to rebel against whatever adults are telling them, the minute they realize they got a sanitized version of history, and quite frankly, the minute you go to college, immediately that's any college professor will tell you, oh no, all that stuff they told you, that was all balderdash. Let me tell you why they dumped the tea in the harbor. It's not, the reasons might surprise you.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. And that's how the story grows. And I think that when you get to that under 20 crowd, there is this world where they are just so much more aware, at least in us, in this first world nation.
Yeah, no, they are, but are they prepared for it? Are they prepared?
Yeah, actually, I think they are. I think they're way more prepared for it than you and I are.
The pull of social media and the pull of on their emotions of what that does. I don't. But
that's the thing. They grew up in it. They grew up in it.
I understand that, but that simply means that they grew up in this experiment.
It
right?
means they
never
born
knew the world outside
of
this experiment. Patch. So they are wildly different. So we can't possibly know that they're prepared for it. So they're not.
Well, I know, and again, I can only go by those I know. I can only go by the anecdotal evidence.
But that's turning a blind eye to everything that you see online.
Well, no,
and indicators that clearly indicate that there is tremendous social pressure that people are bending to without really understanding what it means to be them and why they stand on things.
Just because I do look at demographics as well, and I see how certain groups are aging and dying, and other groups are not. They're actually growing and empowering, and how aging and dying groups are being very, very worried about who's voting and where. And other groups are saying, maybe we should just let everybody vote. And again, from a political perspective, that's not something either side has ever said before. Let's let everyone vote. That one group is saying, you know what, we're feeling pretty comfortable right now. We can let everyone vote. Tells you that there is a perspective involved here, that there is enough demographic data to suggest that if we let everyone who could vote, the world would look very different than the world that we have. And that if we counted each vote equally, everything would be in a very different world than it is. And that is what gives me hope.
It would look like the YouTube comments.
No, it wouldn't, because YouTube comments isn't everyone voting.
Yeah,
YouTube comments,
that's the most democratic thing there is.
Oh, no.
Everybody goes and has a voice.
Now, well, I mean, everyone has a voice, but that doesn't mean that, first off, everyone has a voice, which means that...
And they're showing you who they are.
Yes, but that's one guy showing me who he is. And maybe 20 other guys saying, yeah, I like what you said. and algorithm's going to algor, and it's going to put
The
something in
algorithm is
your.
just a mirror. It's showing us who
No,
we
no, no.
are as
Well,
a
actually,
society.
technically, no. The algorithm isn't a mirror. It's a mirror that's showing you what is going to engage you. So, for example, if you're the kind of guy who
Right.
engages with anger, no, well, that's what I'm going to say. If you are one who engages with anger, it's going to show you things that give you anger.
Right.
If you're one that scrolls past anger,
How is that not a mirror?
because it's your mirror, not my mirror.
No. But it's reflecting what society. It's reflecting the ills of society.
No. But what I'm saying is, it's not. See, if you look at comments as a whole, and again, we're not even talking about society here. We're talking about a very small portion of an engaged community within another subset of people in this world.
I think that's a pretty good
example,
microcosm and indicative of the rainbow of the kind
no,
of
it's
people
not, because it's self-selecting. Because it's self-selecting. That's why there is something called Black Twitter, which is apparently a thing. That the algorithm, if you're in Black Twitter, you will be in what is the Twitter will send you the things.
Its own little zeitgeist.
Yeah, its own little zeitgeist, because that's what you engage in, and that becomes something that me over here on my white boy nerd Twitter. I mean, it's because I do cross over. Sometimes I'll see, hello over there. I'll see that, and of course I'll give it its like, because that's my job.
But you don't think you see a commonality of behavior in all these little pockets, in all each little zeitgeist?
I see. No, there's always humans are the worst as a species, but we are also the best.
We can be the worst, and right now it's really easy for us to be the worst.
No. It's just really easy. Well, yes, it's very easy for us to be the worst, but it's also easy for us to be better.
It's really not. It's very difficult.
No, see, we will have to agree to disagree. And just being willing to say that is, of course, the biggest hurdle that any human has to rise to, is to say, you know what? I can see that you have a difference of opinion than me. You do not control my ability to do things.
Nor does your agreement have anything to do with how you see yourself. I was like, okay, yeah,
exactly. So it's like, okay, that's where you're at, and I get it, and that's cool. But to me, and again, I just have to look at what the larger trends seem to be, and the larger trends seem to be. Again, I get into fights with people in Gen X boards with this all the time. By the way, we're talking about the Loki assembled video here.
No, but in essence, these are the big questions. What is our trickster God? How do we as people deal with it? I think that's relevant to what the show is designed to do.
But this is what I always tell people in my Gen X group. Like, if you were, because there's this big thing about being in Gen X, which is whether or not you were raised by your awful parents, or if you were raised by your television like a sensible human being. And the television taught you about community and respect for difference, and that everyone has a part to play, and we are all part of we're all part of the team, and every team you need everything. You need your jock, you need your nerd, you need your cool kid, you need your triumvirate of the three people in the 80s sex comedy to achieve your goal of touching a boob. And that is, to me, that is Gen X. It's like, or seeing a penis, if that was what girls wanted to do. I don't know. I didn't watch that movie, but honestly, I would love to hear it. And as I understand it, the young women today, they're making the raunchy sex comedies. And I just hope that they learned the lesson to have a cool kid, a nerd, and a jock all together, trying to get whatever it is that girls want, because I don't know. I married one, and that's as close as I ever got to knowing what women want. But moving right along.
Yeah, you're like, I'm it, baby.
But yeah, yes. I don't know. I tricked one into it. I'm not going to try and do it again, man. Somehow I pulled it off. I'm going to call that I consider that an absolute win. But anyway, but that's the question: is are we moving towards something greater, or are we moving to just more chaos? And that is what the great Disney and the algorithm are trying to tell us the story of.
Yeah.
And maybe Disney will tell us a good story, or it'll tell us an awful story. We'll see. And
think
I
they'll
will tell
probably
you
end up
right now,
telling
it's
us
going to have a lot to do with how much people that don't tell stories get involved in the storytelling. And the more that people want to influence the story to tell a story that isn't what people want to hear, that's what's going to hurt them. And that, I think, is the real selling point, is that there's a story people want to hear. And the story they want to hear is what the great TV taught us in the 80s about knowing being half the battle, about we need one of every ethnicity on this team, not just to sell toys, but because that character is going to give us something for the scene. And we're going to subvert expectations, and we're going to explore who it is, how many people, how diverse our American heroes really are, the real American heroes, yet they're all from every group. And one of them just wears black and doesn't talk, so you don't know what he is. Spoilers, he was a white guy, but his face got melted off. So that's a whole thing too. But he was raised but he also had a very good friend who was Asian and Japanese and a ninja. And then we get ninjas, and that's all cool too. But that's the idea, is like the story that people want to hear is we're going to get better. And the more you tell people that we can be better, the more people like that story, because we want to be better. We don't want to be angry.
Right, but it's really easy under that guise to stop thinking logically, right? Everything's okay in the pursuit of being better, and it's really easy to forget why you're doing things and just fall in line with the nice sounding story. And then when you do that, you don't really know what you're standing on. It's easy to talk you into things under the guise of the big banner of this, and that's really, really dangerous. Really dangerous.
But that is, and again, I think that's where this next generation is smarter than we were.
I hope they have the way to be, because sorry, man.
No, I do. So here's a story, because this was in my Facebook memories today. We were watching Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, which is a Star Trek episode, which is the classic Star Trek episode where the left side of the majority race is painted black and the right side is painted white. And as soon as the characters come into the scene, Tristan, like 9 years ago when we were watching, he says, "Hey, they're switched. His white and black is on the left versus right, and his is on the right versus left." This was like, and this is a thing where it was meant to be an M. Night Shyamalanian twist when you watched it back in the 60s. We're like, what? Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize. Wow, is that all this whole racism is just we're mad about, which actually scientists will tell you that the differences of small things is where most hatred derives. It is almost never like it's very rare that you actually get like, oh wow, here is a person who is visibly clearly a different race than me, so I'm just going to hate them. Usually it is some very subtle thing that causes most people to hate and want to murder the other. And if we can start to unpack that and realize that these little things don't mean as much as we say they do, and then maybe even look to how even much bigger things are actually really minuscule. Because honestly, the melanin content of a person's skin is about, it's dramatic because we're visual creatures, but it's also meaningless from a biological standpoint. And that is the real truth of it, is that and I think that kids today can see that better than you or I can, because the great television has raised them better. Which is why, for what it's worth, hey, when was the last time you heard of a progressive organization getting mad at a kid's show? Think about it for a moment. What was the last, it's like, oh, Mr. Rogers was awful. He told kids that they were all, that they could be anything they wanted to be. And oh, Blue's Clues, why are they teaching kids that it's okay to be diverse, and that, pride is okay, that kids can go to the Pride March because it's, people just marching and kids like flags, which isn't what Pride's about. But also it's that idea that if you're mad about the flag, you're mad about way the wrong thing. And quite frankly, that is problematic for you.
Right. No, and that's my point. Like, some of these people are mad at the flag just because society taught them to. Their culture, their surroundings taught them to. They don't know why they hate them. And if they ever sat down and figured out sort of where
they're all over 30.
Right. Yeah, but those are,
they'll be dead soon. Just like me. Because death is a feature, not a bug.
They're not going to be dead soon, and they're still kids too. In my eyes, those 30s they're still kids.
Well, I mean, honestly, like I said, Tucker Carlson is way older than 30. Tucker Carlson.
Right. That's not the kid, but I'm talking about the kids that read it and then opine online.
Yeah, and again, I think that for the most part, and here's what I'll say: in my 20s, I thought stupid things too. And then I grew better.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. My kids are smarter than me when I was in my 20s.
But again, we're not talking about your kids. We're talking about...
Well, I mean, even other kids I know. And that's the thing. Like I said, it's a self-selecting group. That's always the problem. It's always a self-selecting.
And again, when I say kids, I mean kids that have an effect on the world. I'm not talking about, 12, 13-year-olds. I'm talking about 20, 25-year-olds, that the kids that are actually coming into the world and saying, hey, I have a say in how we do things. Those people are the ones that I'm talking about, that I don't think have been educated very well by us in the last 20 years.
And I actually don't think that group is my majority that you're worried about. I think the majority is the exact opposite. And most demographic data I look at says that. Those kids are loud. And certainly, like, for a, there's... So here's
but like they said in Gladiator, the mob is Rome. The loudest people move
the mob is Rome. The mob is Rome, but the mob isn't just because it isn't the loudest. In fact, often the mob will turn on the loudest.
Right.
No, it's not. That's the point.
But these companies make decisions based on the loudest people, right? So just because they're the loudest, they're not a small subset.
That is an assumption about humans that isn't borne out. In fact, often the loudest person is the least listened to. Because the louder you look at
how corporations have responded to loud campaigns online, without even thinking, there's loudness, we step back. There's loudness, we step back. Loudness and the mob has power. They're not this ineffectual fringe group that doesn't do anything.
Again, you have to look at what are people being loud about.
No.
Invariably, when you... Again, that's the thing. Like I said, it comes in. So sometimes someone is loud, but they're actually speaking for a lot of people that are quiet. Sometimes people are loud, and they're speaking for a lot of people who aren't there. They're not speaking for anyone but the loud people. So, for example, and let me give you, and so again, going back to the 80s, there was a time your career could be ended if you were outed as gay. Lil Nas X, his career ain't going no place. Thank you very much. And no matter how loud you can be at Lil Nas X, no one cares. Because Lil Nas X, he does the good songs that the kids today like. And he does the dances, and he's got crazy videos, and that's what the kids today like. And nobody cares that you don't like him for a completely unrelated musical reason. And that's the thing. It's like, in a world where Lil Nas X can be Lil Nas X, and I know it's Lil Nas X, not Little Nas X. That's my failure. I think that says that, you know what? It doesn't matter how loud you are. If you're stupid, you're still an idiot. If you are loud, it's great if other people agree with you and just sort of silently like, yeah, I agree with them. I'm not going to go make a whole post of it, but I agree with them. And for a corporation, they can sort of figure that out somehow. They have another algorithm that figures that out. It's like, oh, whoa. Okay, this is a bad choice. This is not playing well. And we see that, honestly, when people try to harness toxicity, it never really pays off in the long run. Toxicity, it's like, You can get a Snyder cut with toxicity. You're not going to get a Snyder verse with toxicity, and that's just the reality of that story. That you're going to get a lot more. You're going to get a lot more. You're going to get a lot more flies with honey and a gun than you will with just a gun. So. That is, I think, is maybe my final thought on this. We have gone way off topic, but Loki inspires that. He's a trickster god, and he tricks us into talking things that were unrelated to his show because it was so stimulating just to think about all the things that Loki gives us. So,
right, and I think that's what these stories serve, is for us to be able to explore these ideas, to figure out how we actually feel about them by talking about them. And that's, I think, the powerful thing with all of Marvel, is that gives us the opportunity to have these conversations.
And that is why Loki now does not call himself the god of lies or even the god of mischief in the comics. He is the god of stories.
Oh.
Because what is a story but just a really good lie that you want to believe?
Okay.
Just like the MCU. All right, Mozz. If people would like, well, actually, first off, let's talk about a couple quick things. You've been listening to our show. If you go down to the show notes, you're going to find links to things like Linktree, which will take you to affiliated shows. We're all part of the Southgate Media Group network. We also have a feed on Capes and Lunatics.
I don't know if you can hear me, but you cut out for a second.
Yes, go down to the show notes. Click on Linktree, linkt.ee, I think it is. I don't know. I forget what it is. But go to Linktree. Figure it out. You just go to our show notes. We got show notes. I don't know where show notes are. I don't really pay attention to these things. But there, you're gonna be able to connect to our merch. Lots of things. You can go to our Patreon, pledge as low as $1 a month, and get hard R movie reviews. If you pay a little more, you'll get the video. And I'm going to tell you right now, topless video. I'm topless, but it's worth it. Trust me. And beyond that, folks, go down there, go click on our Amazon link, go to Amazon. I hate to support a billionaire who's going to space, but you know what? If it helps the show, it helps the show. And if you buy anything on Amazon, at least click on our link first. So at least it's helping the show as you help a billionaire go to space. And while you're there, check out Pod Life, the book written by the Southgate Media Group community. It is available in both hard copy for after the apocalypse and digital copy for on the go pre-apocalypse. And if you can download it onto your device and somehow manage to find a method to keep your device charged after the apocalypse, it's still good in the apocalypse. So there you go.
Hope we always.
All right, Mozz. If anyone does any of these things, well, there's other ways you can keep things charged during the apocalypse. I'm sure. Maybe magic will come back and you'll be able to call down lightning bolts. Because that'll only overcharge your phone, which will give it eternal power, just like an amphibia, I assume.
Right.
Anyway,
or like that Daffy Duck trick that he can only do once.
Yes. Well, there you go.
But if they'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at mozzmanzoor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzoor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our mothers and fathers once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Facebook or follow me on the Twitter. That's what I'm on. The Twitter. I am on Facebook, but I almost never go there anymore. But follow me on the Twitter at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality. Bing.
Thank you, Mozz. You have listened to another long episode as we have explored all of the convolutions of the cosmos. We thank you for listening. And now we say, enough said. All right, me hearties, you have sailed to the end of another streaming series. 6 episodes in and 1 more for good luck. But now we disembark. But come back again next week, because we're once again sailing full stream ahead. Arg.
Right on.
Okay, so yeah, upload that to Phil.